James, you want to show us more about your, if I'm not mistaken, your paper that you had written up, and of course, because obviously last time we had Michael on and we didn't really get to specifically focus on what you wanted to talk about, but although it was good to have your expertise. So obviously, since you've been there from the beginning. So today we have, well, there's Mike as well. So we have James, Mike, Tanveer, Sean, and Richard.
Rick.
Whatever.
Rick.
Welcome to the August 30th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Buddy, Chris, Robert, Rick, Mike, Tanveer, Sean, and our special guest James Conway, who will be showing us the assumptions and errors in traditional chronological dates and the shoehorning conventional dating needs to do to make everything work. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.
The search term to get to all of these chronologies for you to purview with the
Document.
cycles, the two cycles, is search chronology 1, 2 different words in this number, 36, 35, 7. That's the real deluge date and before the Common Era. It's unique, so it pops up if you search for it.
Oh, okay. So you're actually rewriting the entire chronology from the Velikovskian point of view. I see. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's tradition. It's not his, but it is what he follows.
Well, no, I mean,
it's from the mythical point of view. I think you meant to say, Neil.
Sorry, yes, I'm just noticing these Roman chronology, which is basically 750 is about as far back as we can go.
Yeah. Well, here's the Roman chronology, and here Romulus, the start of it, 753 before the Common Era, and then there's some of the bigger points. The kings here, and the Republic is founded, and all that kind of stuff. Now these dates for like the Republic is founded are off because, I mean, as far as these are the traditional dates, and they don't really follow that.
And these could have been rewritten by God knows who over time.
No, I mean, these numbers are all the traditional numbers, and they're
Oh, I meant by Romans. Sorry,
historians.
The
historians
in general.
Yeah.
Well, I know that Romulus didn't exist, probably. Like he's probably a mythic figure, is what I meant. So, I mean, once
Romulus
the Republic
are the pillars.
Well, yeah, I know we're there, but anyway,
I just wanted you to show you the full one here, because it gives to the point that at the end here, right here at the fall of Constantinople, that's 1457, and that's the traditional date. Now they use a different one, but I don't want to get into that because we'll talk about that later.
So what they're saying is that from 1400, 1547. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's not their date. Well, we'll get to that. Why it's different. The tradition is. It makes a big difference, particularly like if you calculate the deluge date. It depends on the second year of Antonius Pius, which is in the second year is 143.
I see that there.
Different date for that. So let's just kind of pop through some of these things, like the 1163 year of Rome is 410 of the Common Era, and that's when it was sacked. That's the second time Rome was sacked. First time is 400th year. And then, of course, like the second year of Antonius Pius here. And then the 25 cycles of the Egyptian cycles for 36,500 years from that date. And that gives you the deluge date that Mathos and the Babylonian priest Varosus used.
All right, so these are they basically putting the deluge then quite a far back in time.
36,500 from the second year of Antonius Pius.
And this is
this
Roman
starts
record.
to make sense.
This is Roman record, basically corrected.
Yeah, and the Egyptian record.
They
And
coincide.
others.
Okay.
Yeah. Which means
Yeah, this
that
starts to make more sense now.
Now, of course, we do know that it's probably not actually 36,500 actual years because the year might be different, but it was revolutions around the sun.
270 was at one point, but
we can dwell. I don't understand because this is what we're going over. He's going to tell us stuff like this. So anyway, please go on.
yeah, and then these are some of the more common cycles that they put out, and the 24th cycle of that, the 22nd cycle. This is when they use for the Egyptian chronology, the first dynasty of Mathos, first book. But that book is 2,300 years. And funny as it is that you take that 22nd cycle and you subtract that number and you get this number, 3398 BC, before the Common Era. This
so about
is the era.
5,300 years ago.
Yeah, 54 almost.
Yeah.
Or actually it is 54 centuries ago. This date is the era of kings of men and not gods. Before this era, all the kings were kings of the world. They were acknowledged as kings of
Heavenly
the
kings,
planet.
so to speak.
cosmic kings.
Cosmic kings, yeah.
Now this goes into China.
Who was it that had the theory about, if I might be so bold, you probably know this, the one that had the theory, a gentleman, with regards to all pharaohs actually being planets? Was it?
Well, they were considered gods on Earth.
Right, but
so they were expected to take the divine vote and go up and become a star.
All the kings from the old kingdom were named people, but they were actually planets.
Well, I just heard someone say that it was his premise that the actual pharaohs were not actual on Earth. They were just the planets that were dominating at the time. But anyway.
Well, I'm thinking they're different aspects as.
Oh no, I just thought you might know, James.
Changed.
So that's fine. So let's go on.
Okay, I was just saying that that as Squatterman changed, there was different time periods, and they used those different aspects as different kings. So anyway.
So this goes to in China, where they have the traditional date of 2598 before the Common Era for the end of the Yellow Emperor, who was for 300 years ruler, and then for 500 years previous to that. And guess where that takes you?
Right back to the same.
Exactly, and the same thing is true for the Sumerian dynasties. They all start at this. Everybody starts at the same date.
All the real kings, like flesh and blood kings, start at 3398, right?
Well,
yeah, there are a few.
I have a question for you, James. Do you have an idea what a shar is? It's a time frame that the Sumerians used to describe the early kings list, like 46,000 shars.
Yeah.
For one king's lifetime or reign.
Well, when we'll jump into the Sumerian list if you want, where I divided those reigns by 60 years, and you can actually make it fits into the system that way.
All right, well, carry on, and you'll explain it later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Sumerian, the lower and the upper kingdoms of Egypt.
That's such a link, though. A very, very particular date.
Yeah, it's one of the more important traditional dates that we have.
Is it arguably then the when we know, like we actually, well, as you said, it was the kings were on the of kingdoms, like of men. They were men, or apparently. I mean, even 500 years old men, but still.
Yes.
Right, and the Earth has experienced many floods, but not on the scale of when Saturn just dumped most of its water in its environment onto the Earth.
Well, if we had caught all of that, we would have been we would not come back.
It's quite possible.
Anyway, we just got a piece of it, probably. So.
Yeah, some of it.
There's a traditional date of 2555 that they say that's the Sabbath in the Julian year. Then there comes in the middle kingdom of Egypt, which is at the same time at the end of Sumerian, Sodom and Gomorrah, that Passover. And you can calculate this year by, it's the 5th year of Cambius II by Ptolemy, who gave this date of 525 for that date, and the Matthau's second book of 1520, and that gives you the start, gives you the beginning of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt and the end of Europe. So it's very, interesting. And then you get to like the 4th year of Pharaoh, Dan, when Joseph was 17 in 1863, very important. There was a very interesting phenomena coming there. The sun and the moon went out of its course and the stars basically fell down. Pretty much the same thing that happened in 747 before the Common Era. And I think that's my idea, is that the reason these things happen.
Could it not be a polar shift or a flip?
I don't think
okay.
I don't think it's assigned to a polar flip, but
more of a metaphor.
No, the stars actually did change patterns. Now, in the same reign, in 747 BC, before the Common Era, was the start of the 7-year famine in Egypt and the 5-year drought in China. This is the 2nd year of Tang. This all aligns.
Okay.
When you can, since you can align these things, they align with each other. Now, like I said, this doesn't alter from the establishment. They go through, the first dynasty of Egypt to the 12th. It's after the 12th that things get. Then there's the Battle of Syria and India in the traditional year of 1622. And that was the time of Job. Now the next one. Now in the traditions, these are the things that are different from what the establishment does. They go on and putting everything else in a different format, but both Josephus and the Bible are quite clear that the 15th dynasty started right after the 12th, not the 13th or the 14th, but the 15th, and ruled for about 250 years. The Bible gives 215 years, but that's pretty clearly a half of a 430-year period that they use a lot in their chronological things. But so if you take 250 years and you go down there, it gets to 1530, and that's the year that Moses was born, and the flood of Augies occurred on October 31st, where in Ireland, 3/4 of their population died at that event.
So you think it was something that happened in the Atlantic?
Worldwide.
It was probably the capture of the moon, right?
I have no idea about that. There aren't any records that I noticed about that, but I wasn't looking for that in specific. I'm just.
I remember someone mentioning that Greenland had been pulled, and some of the land masses have been pulled towards Europe during the capture of the moon, and that would, in fact, coincide with what you just said about 1/3 of the Irish dying. And all the all the forts up in that area in Scotland and Ireland are just melted.
This is, however, this is 3,500 years ago, so there wouldn't have been Scots in Scotland.
Well, you get the story of the capture of the moon being at 2300 BC.
That's an interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, but anyway, it says right after that, after Moses was born. It says that the traditions are that Egypt experienced.
This is assuming that Moses was real, of course, but yeah.
Well, I'm assuming he is because there are other records on it.
Well, there's some good ideas that he is, yes, but he's also kind of similar to Mises, So I don't know if this is a tale. I don't know, but it would go on.
Yeah. So the Egyptian period of a foreign dominated period of 511 years. Now, of course, this is what exactly matches what Velikovsky said with his synchronization of the chronology, because that brings the New Kingdom to 1018 BC. That's when Saul had reigned for 5 years. So this gives you a fairly firm, this gives you an extremely firm chronology, both with the Irish, the traditional Egyptian, and yeah. Then after this, beginning of the new kingdom, there's a stela, or I forget what they call it. Anyway,
A stele or whatever.
yeah. Well, it says the 400th year of the new kingdom, and that's where, that's where Velikovsky puts Ramses II, and so that would be 618 before the Common Era. And that from the 7th century to today, there's nothing different. But it's that 11 centuries between the end of the 12th Egyptian dynasty in the 18th century BC to the 7th century BC. Those 11 centuries, those are the things that are in conflict with the tradition and with Velikovsky.
Well, this is where we're trying to piece together. I mean, literally, this is Julian West's work trying to figure out, what gods were doing what at what times. Like, because this was the age of chaos, or after Saturn had, the Clash of the Titans type stuff. So.
Yeah. So there's more. There are more traditions, of course, in the Egyptian chronology, and they talk about the shepherd kings. Well, Josephus believed that the 15th dynasty was the shepherd kings, and the others did as well. But it's pretty clear that the shepherd kings ruled for 453 years. You can't put that right after the 12th dynasty. Nor is there any length of dynasties connected together that would fit that amount of period time, except for the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd dynasties of Egypt. So there's a mix-up of who is what and where. The traditions are that the 15th dynasty is actually a Hebrew dynasty that came right after Josephus, who was ruling Egypt at the time. Oh, Jacob's son. Sorry if that wasn't clear. Anyway, there are also traditions that the Shepherd King started when the calendar changed to a 360-day calendar. And we already know that date is the Exodus, right, which is 1440. So if you take 1440 and subtract 453 years, you get into the reign of David, which is, in fact, where he said that his general Job went in, Job or whatever his name is, went in and finally took him out in 987, which is a year after the great earthquake that started the 8th Babylonian dynasty. So these all interconnect, actually.
You know a lot more about these than I do, I'll tell you that. I mean, I can tell you Sumerians came before Babylonians, but look at the stuff that you have written down there. And of course it's good that you point out, of course, that at that time it was kind of an idealized situation, 360, months being 30 full days. We obviously had a moon,
Well, those are astronomical. And the same thing is with the 365 and 365 and a quarter, and then the one that went to 365 and a third, and then it went back to 365, and then it wasn't until the Common Era in year 8 where the Ethiopian dynasty began its calendar, because that's the first 365 and a quarter, starting from the one that we have presently.
That's actually, I did not know of the change backwards. That would indicate that we somehow gained energy from another planet. Interesting. Instead of losing it, I mean.
Right.
changed, or our potential had changed more positively and brought us back closer to the sun.
Yeah, well, it's
Or
just very interesting.
it's a different dynamic than your dead gravity, that's for sure.
Well, the fact that you can influence where planets are, and of course, the idea that the tails of the planets brushing up against each other is sort of like a stabilizing force. That does make sense. I mean, electrically speaking, but of course, these immediately link between charge and mass that immediately follow. It makes this whole thing get weird. But continue on, please.
Okay, then there's the worldwide event of 1199 before the Common Era. There's an Egyptian record for that, and so it gives us the month and the day, which is June 8th. And both the Wu dynasty, the Kassite kings, for 576 years and 9 months, until Nineveh, our old Mosul, got sacked, 622 for the Common Era. That happened in the 13th year of Qing II, when they observed the star. And the Assyrian Empire falls 2 years after that. And in the 22nd year of, and he's after the fall, he started recounting he made a new era for his own reign. In the 22nd year of that reign was when Jerusalem was taken.
So there's a lot of stuff going on at this particular period, and seemed to be influenced by astral events.
Yeah, I was just trying to denote traditional date lengths of time that go from one end to the other, rather than taking each single chronology and going through it and showing you these dates.
No, this is much better. I mean, we're getting the Cole's notes of what we need to know to tackle what's coming up. So
right, if then it's 430 years, that 430 year the Bible just loves. That's from the revolt until the sack of Jerusalem. That's how you can bridge that particular period. And then there's other interesting notes at the end of Cho, or Chao, whatever, how he pronounced his name. He died and his 6 armies with him. And this date here is the same year as the loss of the ark, when Samuel was 12. That gives you additional chronology to work to make these things absolute and strong.
So the ark was actually lost 3,100 years ago? And
from this date, yeah.
And we've been looking for it for this long? Wow. Still making movies about the darn thing.
Okay, then I told you about the this 988 was the traditional date for the 8th Babylonian dynasty that started with an earthquake. And that's the same year of King's David plague, I think it was, and also a comet or a star that they were all afraid of.
Could be Venus, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, I would think it's Venus, the original comet.
Well, there's a lot of stuff
comet
that was going on at the time with like even one falling star, one comet would be. I mean, it must have happened enough because the word disaster exists. Because the word disaster literally means bad star. We have it like it means something. So it must have happened quite frequently when things were falling to earth. Plagues happened afterwards and stuff like that. That seems to be typical. I don't know if it's because of the death that was caused, or was there, rolling masses of, green death coming over the hills. I don't know.
Well, even in ancient times, the planets were considered stars.
Oh, truly? No, I wasn't arguing that, but still.
No, I was just adding some information, Neil.
Truly.
Okay, and then the next other interesting things, synchronicities are like the 10th after Asa had ruled for 10 years, the Ethiopian army of 10 million came in and they all got destroyed by God. It's also the same year that Babylon was sacked. So that gives you a synchronicity to.
Maybe they weren't really sacked by people. It was just something that was made up later.
Well, it was sacked, all right, but who did it sacking? I think
God,
is,
thunderbolts
yeah,
of the gods. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how
Same
they
with
put it.
Mohenjo-daro. When do you think Mohenjo-daro was devastated?
I'm not familiar.
Oh, it's a town in Pakistan that is radioactive to this day.
Oh, that could have been ancient times, much more ancient than these 54 centuries that I'm talking about. That would be an interesting thing to go on, but let's finish up here. Then the third year of thunder and lightning out of a clear sky, and this is the date that it's the middle year of what was it? OMRI, King of well, anyway, this is Samaria's date of founding, the middle of the reign of the king of Israel or Judah. I think it's Israel. Anyway, this is an interesting date because the they actually killed the trees at the time. So usually in tree chronology, everything seems fine for the year that the disaster occurred. It's the year after that they get this big marker. But this killed the trees, so there wasn't a year for the marker. It was, but they found the trees and recognized the year it died. Anyway, the same thing happened in 143 before the Common Era. So this date here in the tree chronology, which they have off sync, but the main thing is that there is 181 year cycles within that period of time. So it shows that the cycle is in the record. It's in the tree records itself independently.
Now that's very interesting. When I see this date here, of course, getting in and around that time frame, I mean, we're talking about the end of the Etruscans, and the third year, thunder and lightning, clear sky, was actually something to describe about how one of the major Etruscan cities was just blown off the map by a 5-mile wide lightning bolt. So this is, yeah. So I mean, it meshes up because they were probably never the same after that.
Oh, yeah. The weird thing is, I mean, not the weird thing, but the thing that made it easier for us to figure it out is they kept on building right on top of the same stuff anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, where would you go? Everything outside of the city is also is screwed, but at the same time, it's going to grow back, and you and the people who are used to cities will have. I mean, everyone's dead except for a handful of you. You're going to stay there, and because you can get all the stuff that's there. I mean,
right, and I think that
Ooh, free stuff.
well, I don't want to think of it that way, but I mean, if you,
Yeah.
I mean, Fallout. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, my piece of land before this was just a teeny little piece. Now I've got this whole city to call my own.
And I'm the king.
Survive. And I think like Noah, I think they dug and I think they stored because they knew these things were going to happen and they all knew where it was. So whoever was surviving, they would still be seeds and tools and stuff so that it would make it a little bit easier.
I see some evidence like 20,000 years ago or more that this seems to be the case. I mean,
I think Noah.
Well, we have all these cities in the Middle East dug into the rock faces and dug underground.
Well, we have them over here too.
They have
let's be honest.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, but
I think
less what's the word I'm looking for? Less detailed. But what I'm saying is, they even had airflow so that air would move through the tunnel systems beautifully. It's highly engineered.
Oh, I'm not doubting that. But you're right. We don't. I'm just. That's what I was thinking about on because I thought those were 20,000 years old, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I want to.
They're probably of many ages, and I think
Get
Noah
reused?
really is just.
You think?
I think Noah's boat was actually just the heavenly boat.
Yeah, I do too.
I think he dug into the ground.
Well, I mean, that's assuming.
Noah's boat was probably the crescent on Saturn.
No. We used to think that's what it was in the grand scheme, but once you see those boat motifs of the flaming boat going off across the waters, like on Viking Funeral, you know, and you or Krishna lying there on his golden bed with
You're talking about the Gould Belt, yeah? Okay.
No. I was actually referring to the Saturn ship, not the Gould Belt. No, this is the Saturn ship would be the one that was basically linked up with Jupiter, and of course, as it was bleeding off charge, it looked like a ship. Had lots of little men on it that were. I mean, I must have looked. I mean, you could see picture or petroglyphs of it. It's amazing. Sometimes it has an eye sticking out of it, which I think is probably Saturn itself. But still, clearly, I think that was Noah's Ark, or the Epic of Gilgamesh, as it were, traveling off, to the lands of the dead. And I think that's where that motif comes from, Osiris, so forth. Anyway, I see. I got you. Yeah.
So the Babylonian era, 747 before the Common Era, on a Thursday. That's one of the rare dates that actually gives us the day of the week.
On the day of Jupiter's alter ego.
Yeah, you got that. And then 60 years later, the year changes to 365 on March 23rd. Not to mention 180,000 people of the army got slaughtered, beamed on top of a hill for some reason.
That's some step voltage.
Yeah. And then the birth of Alexander the Great. Yep. In 354 before the Common Era. That's a very interesting date because according to Isaiah 30:26, that the moon doubled its intensity to what the sun had been, and the sun multiplied by sevenfold of intensity.
So it was flaring up.
Mm-hmm. Of course, that's also the year that Rome got sacked. It's 400th year.
Maybe people went nuts and decided to go kill people next door. I've heard that was a reason. But...
Well, that's actually in the 7th year.
Yeah, that's a thing that happened.
Yeah, they also went in and took care of Athens, or at least they took the Delphi. Anyway, so the main thing is that these are all traditional dates, and they are not, they're solid as far as tradition is concerned, independent on their own. Now, Velikovsky comes in, and he says that these dates, 776, 747, 687, these are events of cycles of tradition of some other body, and then we can calculate and put in the same thing for the Exodus. And here's this 4th year of Pharaoh Dan, and the Sodom and Gomorrah event that stopped a lot of or started or ended many dynasties right there. That thing of it is that's a cycle that can be calculated, which is what this is over here. This is also, those are those cycles.
And this could be arguably Venus and Mars, for example, or Mercury or something.
Or something. It's really not. So here's the Exodus.
Well, we're looking for the evidence, not per se exactly what body. We can nail that down later or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, the tree ring chronologies put that cycle at 181 years per 6. So we have a 30 and 1/6 year cycle going on here. Of course, these are only just the mathematics. They're not. They could be on and off by a year, depending, because orbits are not perfectly circular and they don't go
No,
that way.
that's correct.
So here's the Exodus here. Here's the Joshua event. Here's the beginning of the Venus tablets here. This is the worldwide event in 1199. It started the Kassite dynasty.
That was exactly 5,000 years ago.
Here's well, this is the end of Samson here.
Okay.
Here's the Ark and the end of the China's 6 armies with their king or emperor. Here's the beginning of the new kingdom of Egypt. Here, after Saul had reigned for 5 years. There's that earthquake 1 year previous to the end of all the shepherd kings' influence in Egypt. Saul kind of took care of the majority of that, but it was King David and his general that put the shepherd kings completely out of action in Egypt. Let's see. This is I haven't talked anything about this, but this is a very interesting date here. This is of the Common Era. This is in the Irish chronology, which is 8 years back. So this would be 664 in their chronology. But even it was either the Chinese and the Japanese, their moon prediction numbers and models failed after this particular one. The geologists say that this era here, this period, was when there was a landslide in the Arctic that changed the Earth's orbit.
Right.
And I don't see how they date that.
Sounds like an escape of methane or something like that.
No, I mean, it just sounds like an excuse as opposed to other events, like other possibilities.
And I'll get back on this particular one because in 743 they changed the count of moon after that.
We do know that things like the Antikythera mechanism and stuff are nailed down with regards to their numbers, with like the way that it can predict the moon and stuff. But this would mean that they would have to have picked up that 19-year metatonic cycle or whatever from the moon pretty darn quick after these dates, because it was only built probably, something like 300 or 400 BC. And you're telling me now that at 600 and some odd BC, oh no, this is AD, 672 AD.
Yes.
So well, how do I square that circle?
You can't.
I'm so confused.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just trying to square it. Like you're thinking, right?
Look, there's Babylonian eclipse data for the last 3 centuries before the Common Era.
Okay, well obviously we know they had a moon.
You have to remember, Neil, that the standard
that.
science timeline is probably wrong.
Oh well, we think we've talked about that enough to agree.
I think
no problem, Tanveer.
what James is saying, this Antikythera mechanism was probably built after 700 AD.
No. I mean, it is. It's just
If it
simply
tracks
not
the moon
dated to that.
to now, if it can track the moon even now, then it must have been built after
Well, it was
these events, right?
completely destroyed. So the things that you can pick out of it are the cycles and how they figured out and how they use gears to imitate elliptical orbits and those type of things.
Oh, okay.
It's that I mean, it implies that things were relatively stable and predictable at that point. Now, and that makes a lot of sense for the way that the world works, at least our ideas. Plus, it was also written in Greek, and someone who knew about the Olympic Games and stuff. So it gives you a particular time frame. However, that said, it's not necessarily. It doesn't mean that all the objects that were in the sky didn't eventually fall somewhere. I mean, there could have been lots of little objects that when they come highly charged pieces of these rocks come near us, they could really mess with us. Small ones cause Shoemaker Levy like explosions, right? So we got to understand that transferring power to the planet Earth and actually moving it, that's
right. Like
doable.
a mountain-sized asteroid could cause us problems electrically in its tail.
Well, it would blow up it would blow up in the sky. It wouldn't hit us, but in the blowing up, it would just turn to dust and of course be welded to the ground in certain places, of course, and it would be fairly catastrophic. So this could be records of one of these cycles could be us passing through asteroid belts, for example, or debris fields. I don't know. I mean, these are cycles that James has pieced together, and I think it's fascinating.
You would think that these debris fields are from events like the birth of Saturn or the carving out of Valles Marineris.
Yeah,
that's what I think that they're from.
Well, some of them certainly could be. I mean that we do that Rome got buried over time. Maybe this was the event of 672. Who knows?
Anyway,
sorry, James, go ahead.
The year was different. I mean, the Julian year of 365 and a quarter, that was the astronomical year. If you take the Babylonians eclipses, and if you were to use an astronomical 365 and exactly a quarter, the eclipse data would match better. The ones that they've got, they're so off that what they've done is they took the center of it, the third and the first, they put it right in the middle, and they made them match the best. And on the closer ones and the further ones are really not really good matches.
Gotcha.
Because the difference is like, I don't know, it's 6 minutes. But it adds up, but there's the year that we have now came from after they did that, the 365 and a quarter minus this, that, and that. That's before this date. All the fall equinoxes landed on Augustus's birthday, and they didn't change.
Oh, okay.
So things were different.
And we only had 10 months at one point of the year, 30 days.
Well, yeah, but that was a Rome thing. I mean, we do know that the 12 cycle seems to be older. I'm not sure why the Saturnalianists, I don't know what they would be called, went all nutty there. But the only thing we have to be happy for is whoever changed it got stabbed. So.
Okay, now we have to go on to the second body. There's two, because at the 747 BC, before the Common Era, there was not only one body, but there was two besides the Moon and the Earth. And so we have a synchronicity right here. What do you know? In year 4 of the Common Era, when Jesus was born, and here it is, the sack of Rome in 410. And if you look on the Assyrian list, this comes into play of year of chaos.
Right.
So I had to that's that's when that's my particular list, because I take out one of their the Assyrian dynasty. You have to take one of them out, make them contemporary with the last one, and that brings down a lot of these dates, and which is why they can make things match in the present establishment way of doing things.
Okay, I see.
And here's the 1842. That's the year of 7 years of famine and 5 years in China. So this cycle matches all of these particular ones. I could run through a lot of these things. Here's the
Well, I
Hebrew
noticed.
day.
No, but I noticed that you have 747 on both of those, second smaller body as well.
Yes.
So that must have been a big deal. And I'm assuming that we're talking, and this is just an assumption, that it looks like we're dealing with. I mean, when I hear 747 or something in that area, or 687, 747, 687, that's probably Venusian. The second smaller body, Mercury. But
Well, Velikovsky held it to be Mars.
he did held it to be Mars. Okay.
Yes, he did.
And you're challenging him on that.
Yeah, because they go further on.
Okay.
The 535 is this one here. I should have put it on this particular one, but I'm trying to make these things as simple as I could. But anyway,
good luck.
Here's the simple. Here's the Hebrew date. They actually have well, I'll talk about that later. 4th year of Pharaoh Dan. This is Jesus' crucifixion, but it's actually 37. The year is 37 because it's 33 years before he was born. After he's born in year 4, which is a traditional date and known. The year 4, that is. There's all these. I could. It would take me a long time to run all through these. Some that you would be familiar, and some that you would not be familiar with. Let's see what I can clamber up over here. Well, here's that's the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
Geez. Well, I mean, here's like I say, mathematically, these can be on and off by a year. The Olympics, 747. Well, this is T here over here. I'm sorry, this is T. This is this is the big one, the one that makes 504 actually is the date for the founding of the Roman Republic.
I see there's a 535 in there. Well, that's BC. Oh, sorry, that's BC. Go on. Yep, go on.
Yeah, well, it can. Let me tell you, it got me confused a couple of times.
No, I have to understand because I have to remember what category I'm in, right? So.
Yeah. Well, all these here are just this one row here.
It's common.
Yeah, the rest of them are BC.
Right.
Yeah. This is the 7th year of Herod, and this is the earthquake, and this is when Augustus beat Mark Antony. That's the great earthquake, and it changed the orbit back to a 365 flat. For 36 years, they didn't have any until the Ethiopian calendar. reinserted in the year 12. For 36 years between there was no leap days.
Wow, these guys must have had their hands full, not getting killed. I mean, could you make predictions and then suddenly the planet moves slightly? Like, you know, all those predictions about those eclipses I was making? Ignore that. I have a new one.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Here's Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, forget that for some reason. This Sodom and Gomorrah at the end of year 3, the beginning of the New Kingdom. Of course, it's year off, but that's what happens with math. The average. And here's the birth of Alexander the Great, and here's his death. And here's comet of 1577. And that was measured, its head only, not its tail, over 1,000 miles wide.
That's a big one.
Yep. And the previous year to that, on let me see, it was April 23rd. This is 1547. That changed the moon's phase from they switched from new moons to full moons. The moon just switched them on that year at that time. And this is the cause
Switch what? Its face?
There's phases, full moons to new moons.
What does that mean? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
You can calculate the eclipses until you get to this particular date, and they're all firm. Before that time, there's no firmness in them at all.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, and this, of course, we're talking about. This would imply then, if it's changed from a waning to a waxing, it moves to the other side of the planet?
Well, or forward or backward.
Or what about the planet flipping?
Well, no, because then we would definitely notice the sun had moved spots first. But if the moon was waxing and then it's suddenly waning and moved from a waxing to a waning, then that means that it's on the shadows on the other side of the moon, which would mean the moon would have to be on the other side of the planet. Which, I mean, technically, if we are somehow held together with more electric possibilities, that's not impossible. Although, wow. I mean, something would have moved it in one spot.
Wow is just.
Well, I mean, it would have been flying through the system, like, you know, like, let's say, you know, I mean, this would have had to happen on 1547. A comet would, I don't think the comet would have that kind of power to cause that, but still, you know, 1547, we're talking about this would be the Reformation. Type of thing?
They are connected to the sun, and everything's connected to the sun. So the sun, if there was a change in the environment that the comet caused the moon to change positions, well, I
can't picture that as being changing positions so benevolently, because it seems catastrophic, and you know, just the thought of it. But
it's a different gravity paradigm.
Well, no, I mean, I have to accept that there's a possibility, but obviously I mean, given the currentness of that date, I would be more inclined to think that there would be, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, that they wouldn't be. I mean, we've seen it. Although amazingly enough, people have been convinced to ignore certain facts in front of their faces before. So, you know, don't ignore that rock that fell from the sky. Rocks don't fall from the skies. There's no such thing as meteorites. You know, that was only 300 years ago.
Yep. And then here is this particular date. I believe before that Greenland or Iceland, no, Greenland was without ice. Right there. The tree lines moved 200 miles south after this particular event. And then here, of course, is the no, yeah. Here's the comet of 1456, and it occurred in June, the year previous to the sack of Constantinople. This happened in June, and Constantinople was sacked in May.
And we have record of that, or?
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
that's a
these
traditional
cycles
date.
that you're seeing, are the implication would be that some of the bodies of these cycles continued on. Like, if, for example, we consider the Mars and Venus to be, besides the two moons of Mars, which are comparatively tiny, it's possible then that these cycles continued and the bodies had already moved to their spots, and maybe there were other moons that are now comets continuing on those trajectories or something.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would expect anybody who said, I believe that this particular cycle T ended sometime in the 17th century, before 1655. That's my idea. But just
Okay.
like Velikovsky, I expect somebody else to check, see if this continues, because in 1666, London burned down.
Right.
So, I was looking at that too, but maybe it's just my desire to put an end to this cycle in my own head.
Well,
to
yeah,
feel
because it's
better.
getting uncomfortably close. I mean, we do know that there are events, Great Chicago Fire, to name one, that were pretty catastrophic and pretty darn close to the current date. So, current days, and of course the Carrington event, and we just have to go back just 100 years before that, and things are quite uncertain, especially.
Well, as time goes by and these comets and meteors break up due to gravitational forces and they get swallowed up by Jupiter, they get less and less and less common occurrence. And the original chunks of comets and meteors that came off of from these events are slowly being swept up by the sun, for one, and Jupiter and Saturn for two. I would think Saturn has some role in pulling cometary debris and stuff out there that into its
Well,
influence.
Jupiter's a bit of a badass in that regard. Saturn, however, I think does have more moons. So yeah, like, I mean, I mean, there's 68, I think, around that friggin' planet, or 86 or something. I mean, it's.
Yeah, there's a lot of moons around Saturn compared to Jupiter. Jupiter has what, like 30 or something like that, 40?
Yeah, it's still enough for an entire population of human beings.
So somebody can argue that these are caused just purely by very small things with huge electrical effects. So, my ideas may not pan out in the end.
Well, no, but I mean, it gives you some good ideas that these things continued on for a long period of time, or at least vestiges of them.
Right.
Vestiges would be comets and asteroids.
Well, it's just an idea. Yeah.
So and it fits. I think it fits.
So here's the other cycle. Here's Y cycle. Guess what that date is? That's the Byzantine era by Africanus. 1502. That's his date. It's a great date. Right there is when Jesus was born. Here's the sack of Rome in the 1163rd year.
So this is when they coincide.
Right.
Like you're actually showing the two different ones. I thought the first chart was a combination chart. That was just one body. So this is a second body completely.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably should have separated these two.
That's quite all right.
Here's the first one. See, I had it marked at B, C, and C over here. one, and
Well, no, but at least now I can see. So, and then there's the next one is
the Y, cycle Y here. There's like I said, the two bodies, two different things.
right.
So here's the 335 event, which in the tree is 336 because it's a year
Right.
after.
Well, I mean that we all know about the comet of 335, 535, and Justinian's plague and the fall of Rome and all that wonderful stuff.
Yeah, all that wonderful stuff.
Yes.
And here's the Normandy here, and it is in fact 1067. It's not 1066. There's traditionally there's 1067 was the date, and they still have both of them. They still use both of them.
So
the establishment used 1066 though.
Well, yes, but this is this is implying then that then that there's something that that would cause men to go, let's go, Normans.
Well, maybe not that, but maybe had some effect. Either knocked the supply lines or killed other people. Killed
Made
some
men
of the
go
army
nuts
off,
even, yeah.
Just scared them,
Yeah.
or God knows.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you see things in the sky, it's that back then it wasn't the type of thing where people went, oh yeah, no, that's cool. It does that occasionally. They do exactly what they did in Game of Thrones. There's a red comet in the sky. What should we do? Gather up your favorite relatives. We're going to burn them in a big pyre. Oh, by the way, bring your daughter. We have something special for her. So, I mean, it's what I watched Game of Thrones.
Baal
it was scary.
And Moloch and all of that stuff. That's ancient god worship. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're scared of what you see and you think it's a sign specifically for you. I mean, we watched just that Rick and Morty thing where the giant head showed up and then everyone started worshiping him and sending people to go visit them by tying them to balloons till they died. Like seriously, I mean, it's just like people, I mean, this is people trying to deal with impossibly stressful situations like that we can't fathom. Like, to give you an idea, imagine a spaceship shows up that's about a third of the size of the Earth, that's covered in nuclear explosions and seems to be talking to people on the Earth and occasionally blowing parts of it up. You're going to do whatever you think it wants. What else can you do?
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, please go on. This is just amazing what you found.
Okay, so. This is a more BC dates here. Here's the 1842 famine.
That's that big one.
Yeah. See. Oh, here's 1529. That was in February. That's 511 years before the New Kingdom. Oh, here's part of the Venus tablets. Right here is one of their disruptions here. The interesting about the Venus tablets is that somebody kind of like pushed Venus, and then after it got pushed into a different kind of orbit, it went right back as if nothing had ever happened.
Well, this would lend credence to what Jim was talking about then, because Jim's argument that he debates with me is what do these shells of current that are passing through the solar system? My argument was that the magnetic field of the Earth would pinch them, or of the sun would pinch them all down. Jim has convinced me that probably only the middle current would be pinched down, and therefore there would be concentric rings coming in the magnetic fields. And as such, each planet takes a spot along the rings to stick to one of them, like a cow sticking to the side of a tornado,
Yeah. After an email with Scott.
Yeah, the magnetic field lines of our magnetosphere, which have multiple shells. Yeah.
Well, I was referring to the sun in this case, but yeah.
Before Don Scott got famous, when he would answer my emails, in the 90s here, We were talking about that, and we got to somebody mentioned that the magnetotails would are pushing things around, so they're the spacers. They push everything in the right back into the old
Well, they're not
space.
really pushing anything. They're just allowing the energy to be transferred along them and then balanced because of that. I think that would be the most logical. Now, of course, this implies, as I said before, a link between uh, Coulomb charge and mass that we're not really comfortable with yet. But
Well,
Well,
I'm
we
not
have to
getting there.
figure out the
comfortable with
reason.
mass.
We have to figure out the reason why comets penetrate multiple shells and don't get sorted out themselves on these shells.
Well, they're probably because they're crossing them pretty rapidly. Number one, they don't have a lot of charge themselves to interfere with the shells, but
Do
we
you think
do
it's just a
know that
velocity
they
thing?
do. Well, no, we know that they go through shells. Sometimes, for example, one was out past Jupiter when it suddenly flared up to be as large as the Jupiter's magnetic field. Like just
Yeah,
went.
that was the one that
"Whoa."
shocked NASA and said, comets shouldn't be lighting up that far
Well,
out.
when they cross these fields, I think it's quite possible that when they cross these shells, things can happen. Same thing that happens when we send, space shuttles in through our atmosphere and they cross multiple shells and then explode. Maybe we shouldn't be sending metal ships through electric atmosphere. But anyway,
Yeah, and then here's the interesting Assyrian, the year of chaos, 1060
1060.
before the Common Era, and this is the date when David died. This is the year that David died, and it was a very interesting little thing that I found reading him is that he heard something musical outside, and he walked out, and when he went through the archway, that thing on the middle, up top on an archway that
Mhm.
holds the thing up, that fell down and hit him in the head and killed him. At least that's what I read.
Huh.
So,
What? Could you repeat that?
well, he heard something out. He was inside studying the Torah,
Like
and
you do.
he heard something musical outside. So he went to investigate, and when he went through the doorway, the archway, that thing in the middle that holds arches up, it fell and hit him in the head.
Keystone. The
Yeah.
keystone.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Anyway,
doesn't
I always
that-
found that interesting.
Well, no, it sounds interesting, but doesn't it also, like the motif of that alone, doesn't that seem like an astral allegory right there? You have two pillars on either side. A man walks to the middle, hearing singing voices. He's beckoned by the gods. The sky collapses.
Actually, musical from the sky. Musical from the sky. It wasn't singing voices.
Resonance. Auditory resonance. That's how we break crystal glasses.
Yeah, it's true. But I just was thinking about that as a motif because of the fact that it was an archway. I mean, passing through a doorway is like a Masonic thing as well, and two pillars on either side. Plus, you have something coming straight down, falling. So the implication of collapsing or fallen gods.
It could definitely be
Mars descending.
No, I mean, it could also be that they added this afterwards with no bearing whatsoever on what really happened. Because, he choked on a cookie and died. No, I have a better story. This will assure he gets into heaven.
Well, I didn't think of the archway as being going from life to death, but yeah, that's an interesting. We'll go on to the next end here.
Well, yeah, I have to think about things like this because people, once you hear the story, you sort of want to put your heroes in that same motif. Like it's just the same thing as putting the stars and stripes at baseball games. It's
or rewriting history.
I was being a little bit more benign, but yeah.
Here's BC 747. The same, both T and Y. They're at the same time.
Sorry, Neil. I just gotta say, Neil, say what you mean.
I did. I was just thinking sports teams, you weirdo. Anyway, please go on.
Here's talking about sport teams. Here's the 300, 497 before the Common Era.
That's when they were all doing that stupid thing, and that the Persians apparently We're no longer Caucasians and really liked facial piercings.
Exactly. And here's I forget what era that is, but it's an era. And this here, right here, is the most dramatic geological events of the first millennium BC. Right here.
What happened?
I guess they got together and didn't like each other so much. And here's the let's see. Here's the plague of the Common Era. Here's the plague.
Yes, that's that was something noted too. The plague and other things seem to have a tendency to react to Venus, according to Sir Fred Hoyle, of course.
Yes, and here's the earthquake of the Boston and Lisbon earthquake, right here.
Boston and Lisbon happened the same year?
Yeah, very short time between each other. Lisbon, of course, is known better. Oh, I forgot this one. This is the Jamaican event where Port Royal got slaughtered.
Yeah, that was Port Royal. Didn't it get
Wasn't
an
it
earthquake
sunk?
happen and just fell into the?
He got tsunami'd badly. Badly.
Well, it was
along
doubly
with the
worse.
tsunami, but it dropped in elevation.
Well,
as well.
it wasn't
it dropped
actually
like 30 feet or something like that.
It was only
This
a
is-
sandbar anyway. That's what made it so dangerous and obviously destructive. Yeah.
But for some reason, people. This is also the Cascadian mega earthquake,
Oh.
and they say it happened later, but they're taking trees that were nearly dead and adding their true tree root growths after they had been knocked down as additional years to whatever date that they put that to. But this is the Cascadian mega event.
I noticed that 1974 is your last one there. Well, besides 2006.
Yeah, well, yeah, and beyond. I don't think anybody's found this particular body. Okay.
Well, I don't know. Well, the thing is that we may not have. Well, we could have found this body. I mean, you have a lot of very interesting dates here, but a lot of them, like especially these plagues, linking them to anything to do with Venus would be a boon if we could find any repeats. 8 years seems to be a tendency between the orbit of Venus and us, and in particular, there has to be a new moon. Apparently, according to Sir Fred Hoyle, that was his. That's when the best connection would be made between our planet and Venus. Now, of course.
Well, notwithstanding that, Venus had a different orbit for 750 years at one point in our past.
Oh no, but I'm trying to only think
orbit of Earth. Yeah,
I'm only trying to think of the more recent stuff. That's what, because we know that in 1918 we had the Spanish flu, and that apparently links up with an orbit of Venus. See, 1912 doesn't, but something like that, where we could find a body that sort of has close approaches on similar dates. That's all. Could have been a comet. Could have been a big one. Could have been gone at 7:55. We don't know. We do know that some of them broke up into two separate pieces and went on different courses afterwards. That could have been it. It could have screwed up the path at that point.
Now we get to the point where why the establishment has rearranged these synchronicities.
Okay.
So we'll figure out how this works. This is the today's. If you could calculate backward, this is what the in this year would have been the moon at age 0, day 0. And I go back 1 year, 4 years, and 7 years, 8 years, and 9 years, and give the same dates. And you can tell by this that this should be on 0, 0. But if you move it back one, like previously, the establishment had not the 1457 synchronicity onto 1 year back. And this is what's pretty common that they would do. And even Ptolemy did the same thing with the Babylonian era. He used his starting date is not 747 before the Common Era, the Babylonian era, but he used 746. And if you calculate backwards with our retro calculations, the Confucius dates for eclipses are off by a year.
Have we considered it was simply a zero thing? What I mean by that is that because we're working in reverse, you don't say that we're starting on the 0th year. You say we're starting year 1. And that can cause issues with regards to this sort of thing. Just a thought.
Right. Yeah. No. It's very clear that the date is 746. Ptolemy you're talking about.
Well, yeah, that's all I meant because
the Ptolemaic period, right? You're talking about when you say
Ptolemy. Yeah. And he's the guy that has the Earth-centric idea of the universe. I guess.
Flat Earth.
No. Well,
I'm sorry. I was talking about the Ptolemaic canon.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the dude.
No.
Please, then I'll shut up.
No. I mean, it's.
Hey,
I get confused with these things all the time.
I thought I was a smart guy, and here I am. No, there's another Ptolemy. Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to just stop talking.
The Ptolemaic period is I believe the Phoenician period.
No, I'm not talking about the Egyptian chronology there. I'm talking about the. I don't have the. I'd have to go through my paper, and it would take me forever.
It's okay. Please go on.
Just carry on.
Okay. So here is the 25th of January, 1 year back, and it's day 17. 4 years back, it's age 15. Basically, they flip from New Year's to full moons, either 1 year or 4 years apart. This is what it is presently given as is 1453 as the end date for Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire. This is what the establishment uses. They flip from new moons to full moons, new moons to full moons, and vice versa. That's to match the records.
Because they don't match up anymore.
They don't. And it's why basically most of the records that we have disappeared.
Which is the Reformation idea, where basically they went and said, all this stuff is crap, burn it. This is the new stuff now. I'm going to write it from memory. Trust me, it'll be all true.
Well, I think after any time that we come through a fairly significant change in the cosmos, man forgets it. He recreates a new system, and then he pretends that it's never been anything different than what it is now. They're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't have computers and memory storage like we do now. So if that happens now,
yeah, but
we have a record.
What if the thing that falls apart is our electricity?
Well, it'll be rebuilt, and we'll just reconnect to the old storage devices and figure it out.
No, I don't think so.
CD-ROMs will be probably okay, but everything else is magnetic, and it could get nuked.
Or one, like I said, man forgets. They recreate the new system, and then they pretend and. And anybody
they're trying to make they're trying to agree. I mean, this makes sense. You're trying to use it to plant crops and stuff. You need to know this stuff, and so they're going to work diligently to figure out how the skies have changed, pass this down to everybody. People on hills will come down and tell you, but of course, for the first little bit, you're going to be just doing it. Just counting the days. trying to figure it out for yourself, and then you'll.
And anybody who disagrees with the new guys gets knocked off.
Yeah.
And you don't. We're all the crazy ones, because we
Or
care.
called crazy.
Yeah, because we care. We really want to know how this works. Nobody else cares.
And we should know how this works, because this is pretty much a damning piece of evidence that basically says that, guaranteed something has happened with our calendar at this point. And something, it could have been, as you had indicated, and rightfully so, that there was a rewrite. And of course, what you do is you try to hide that the skies were ever different. Could you imagine if there are books that indicate that? I mean, there are books that indicate, but could you imagine if there was a book somewhere in the church that's basically, and it was public knowledge to everyone, like that basically said, like, if
it was standard science or standard theological doctrine, it would mess with people's heads.
Yeah, they would get rid of it because of the fact that, well, why did God change the way that the sky works?
Exactly.
Very difficult.
What you're
things.
talking about is the origins of cultural control.
Yeah.
This is the very beginning of.
Well, this is 1500 AD, so it's been going on for a bit at this point, I'm sure.
And there were legitimate reasons for it, like you say, like the crops and such. But it was also more to bring the people together under a united ideology and thought process. This is really the origins of how we control each other and how we manipulate each other, and the kinds of things that we're all bucking against today really do have their origins in the sort of timelines that you're touching on. It's very impressive.
Also, I mean, we should also admit that even disastrous events in the are hard to remember for some. I mean, we have the advantage of not having to we have TV, so that I know some dates more than the average person would. But I know Mount St. Helens, and this, for example, the great San Francisco earthquake, and the more recent one in 1989. But if you were just, a human being living in and around one area, well, you wouldn't hear about those. You'd have the volcano went off.
Yes.
Yeah, and but what caused it and so forth. And I like how that you have this record that seems to indicate that this, even earthquakes or volcanoes were set off by these things, which is another interesting link.
Yeah, and maybe I should go down to the next one. Nope, not that one. That's for later. Let me talk a little bit about the three main ones. The Olympic cycles every 4 years. They already knew that at the beginning that those were actually 8 years apart. They don't know how many were, but the Irish synchronicity that's there indicates that that event happened in 1530 before the Common Era, and they're 8 years off that mark. So if you were to calculate how far back the Irish system is 8 years, that means the first three were 8 years apart. But they still use the 4-year count today in the establishment. That's why they've got 1453 for the ending of the Byzantine Empire, because they're trying to reach to that point. They want to get it 8 years or 7 years back from where it really is, because they want it to count as being the same. See? So, and they do that by, despite the fact that in 1453, the Pope that called for the bells to be rang when Constantinople was being besieged didn't start his reign until 1455. It's not possible for that date to be 1453, but they like it because it matches closer to the records, to what the record calculations are.
Oh.
And if you go back further, that messes with everything 4 years off.
Right.
Then you go down to the 1st century, and in the year in that synchronization of 1453, in the year 78 and the year 43, there's extra sub-councils rather than, or I forget what they call it. There are councils and then there are pro-councils. And they messed up in saying that those 2 sub-councils were actually pro-councils. So they added 2 years. So there's 6 years. So you only got 1 more year to get, or 2 more years. And they put that synchronization right in the area where they don't have any year count chronology in the Roman period before the Common Era. That's why you get all kinds. I've seen like 3 or 4 dates for the 7th year of Herod the Great when the earthquake happened and Augustus started his reign. I mean, one, I should say.
Well, well, obviously it can't because he wouldn't be there. You can't have the events that the guy is supposed to do a year before he took office.
Yeah, but there's nothing solid for them to peg anything against, and so everybody can shift things anywhere they kind of basically want to.
Yeah, that's not cool. But I
Who
understand
needs
that
time travel when you got date control?
it's true. I mean, I also heard, according to some of the arguments from like people like Fomenko and stuff like that, that their arguments were, number one, these dates don't match, and number two, one guy saying that basically all these people before him's word was gospel does not make it true. Basically you have Scaliger just vouching for all of history, and then sort of writing these dates. It's just not beneficial, I don't think. And of course, I mean, it's also silly to actually not question. I mean, you should question these dates because obviously they're worth questioning. Look at what we're looking at here.
Well, just like uniformitarianism is standard science and accepted science.
Well, there's some merit to it.
It needs to be questioned because we
it
know
should be,
certain
yes,
things
of course.
now.
I mean, we, especially with that, what was that called? We were just talking about I think Michael was talking about Mount St. Helens and going there 10 years later and looking like 10,000 years had gone by,
Or 1,000 years, yeah.
Or yeah. Anyway, go on. I'm sorry, I don't want to stop you. You have a thing going.
No, I mean, this is the basic of the cycles. There they are, the synchronicities, how that changes the moon phases. Those are the basic things. The only thing that you can do after that, besides go all through these cycles, is go through each of the chronologies and how they fare out, or you can get pretty minute data if you want to, but not everybody's so interested. I found this particular interesting that if you take the Hebrew dates at the beginning, you come up all the way to 956 8 BCE. That's the Atlantean date of sinking right there.
The sinking of Atlantis?
Yep.
And isn't the birth of Adam right around the time frame of 12,900 years ago when the first event happened? The first major event that nearly wiped out everybody and everything on the planet?
We have to admit that God, Adam, and Eve is very similar to and the snake is, it's just the same motif. Snake, the tree, three gods in the sky. I mean, it's the same.
Right, yeah, I was just pointing that out.
Yeah, this might actually be better named the new age of Adam, because I think there's been several.
And there were giants in the past before man.
Yeah. And the 1107 is also the geological era here. This is the geological era present.
And what does the Bible say about repopulating the earth from Adam and Eve? They would have said just straight out populate the earth. They wouldn't have said repopulate the earth because there was beings before them.
Well, I think
Giants.
well, the thing is that we
Us.
got to understand that creation, number one, probably wasn't actually creating of the earth. It was probably something in the sky. Number two, there was an actual this Captain God with the big beard stuff, and Saturn and the Lancelot Guinevere or whatever, or this is Camelot on the mountain, or and then of course you have Atlantis. Same thing.
Basically, it's the beginning of the Silver Age at the
it
end
seems
of
to be
the Purple Dawn. Yeah.
So some beautiful stuff happened before that. That's the type of stuff I want to know. The stuff before that time. I've seen that date placed, the antediluvian date placed a lot sooner than that, a lot closer. But I think that you're probably right that it was way, way back there.
Well, it had to have been about 12,800 years ago, during what science is well established at 12,800 years as pulse meltwater 1A, which rose the ocean levels up 200 feet. And then 1,200 years again later, another pulse of water came in and rose the oceans another 150, 200 feet to 350 feet, 400 feet now.
The pyramids actually give the date. The pyramids actually give a date of 10,490 before the Common Era as the beginning of a 100-year building period of the Great Pyramids.
And
so
who gives you that? Because I don't.
Those are the pyramid guys.
Who wrote those?
2550 before the Common Era date for these for a Sabbath year and a Julian year at the same time.
I think they may be a little older than that, but anyways.
Who knows?
No, I mean that's just one synchronicity. Every 350 years that matches.
It's very nice. Good synchronicity, yeah.
Anyway, here's part of the if anybody's interested in the Bible, it's specific, gives you specific dates.
This is your interpretation of their how long ago they were and so forth.
Right. These are, as far as I'm concerned, they're hard dates. Sodom and Gomorrah, he agrees with the Egyptian dating system for the Middle Kingdom, and it also matches with the Sumerian at the end of year 3.
Huh.
There's a sacrifice of Isaac at age 25.
Jacob's ladder, I see you have in there, yeah.
Yep. When he left. There's another good one. Oh, a really good one is when Jacob died in 1833. It gives a really, hard dates. A lot of people don't understand that in the Bible that the dates that they give is like they make a system and then they follow that. But the stories are the thing that are actually can tell you whether or not they're, absolute or not.
Right.
They're just references. They're not necessarily absolute. They could be, but rarely are they absolutes. Sometimes they're just a basic system.
It's just a story, yeah.
Well, plus, of course, anytime you go back further than Abraham, you're completely you're losing. You're going into those truly fantastic ages where the Earth would have to be something monumentally different for someone to live 900 years, for example. It's just not something we're used to. I mean, 147. You could say, well, if it was 260-day years, he could have lived to be 110,
Yeah. Well, I think the story of Adam living, 1,000 years, and the people before Noah living up to 1,000 years, if the energy was different and we were surrounded Saturn and we weren't being bathed and bombarded with these cosmic rays that shorten our lifespan and damage our telomeres to the point where they can't fix themselves, fix our DNA, and then we pass away. I think it's not impossible to think of us giants as having 1,000-year lifespan.
No, it's actually. I mean, they talk about the fact that death didn't exist until after a certain period of time. I mean, like I said, it's you could get eaten by a lion is one thing, but actually dying of old age, who the fuck invented that? Like, I'm just trying to imagine what they were probably thinking. And of course, we have to look at Adam's age.
I think it's
the
a
same.
terrible idea.
I know.
Well, I think it says the Sumerians say that the
recalled.
Anunnaki restricted us to 120 years.
Well,
but the Anunnaki, as we know, are the planets. So
exactly.
But restricted us to 120 years, or our solar environment.
Well, if you look at some of the older ones, like for example, they talk about a lot of this stuff is just we don't know, so we're going to make up a story that sort of everyone kind of likes. And like the 3 emperors of China or the 3 original kings of Rome or something, and they're basically doing a creation myth.
And they're given human attributes. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I would go with that. Would be much more likely, especially when you go back that far, because they just you just basically go, okay, the gods. Here's the 3 of them, and then Jeff was here. I remember Jeff. He's an old guy, and so,
he told me about these gods were planets. Which is real? What? Tell me the truth, Grandpa.
That's why Plato wanted to strangle them later. But just shut up.
Well, not only the fact that if we did have long lifespans and multiple generations below us that we could still talk to and inform them of what happened in the past.
Yeah, but could you imagine how much we wouldn't talk? I mean, if you could live to be 1,000 years old and everyone's just kind of chill, like because you grow up with that mentality that people were
well, apparently
chill.
We didn't have languages like we did now.
We
communicated in a different way.
If that was the case, yeah, could you imagine an electrical environment that we were sort of led by these smart folk who were really kind of old, and and they would just teach kid benevolently like 1,000-year-old elves would or something to live in harmony with nature, because that's just the cool way, because you know what? Otherwise,
well, it's the way it's been done forever and ever. Amen. In the purple.
Well, we don't even know.
Things change, right?
You don't even know if that was done that way. I mean, they have evidence that we have built some amazing structures that are just too massive to be anything except for, some could possibly be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years old, 100,000 years old. Like we're just reaching back at a time there.
We see Bosnia, and we see the river that runs through Bosnia has been made to run through Bosnia that way.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
Underneath the river, these riverbeds have been created in the same way the pyramids were created, with this concrete, with this special concrete. You can see it lining the banks of the river. You can see it all running up into the pyramid.
Anyway, let's find out what's going on with these dates here. So we have it going from Abraham and Isaac, of course. We start really reaching in past after the Exodus. We are pretty much entering into things that are, I would say, much more historical. We'll go with it, I guess.
So after the Joshua event, that's the very interesting one, because there's 2 events in his first year. One of the earthquake that takes out Jericho, and then about 3 months later, or 3 months later, I don't know if there's a date for that, but I sure wish there was. That gives you the kind of what its body is, and so it basically, the Earth goes around the sun for 1/4 of its distance around, and then you can calculate that. But this other body, it goes by the Earth, it comes closest to the sun, and then it comes back and it re-encounters the Earth again and flips it over. Now, that's 270 degrees. It's the closest approach it has, which means it came as close as almost or about 32 million kilometers to the sun. And that means its furthest approach would be 6 million kilometers beyond the average orbit of, how do you pronounce the name of that planet? Uranus or something like that.
Uranus.
Yeah. So one thing you can tell from this is that Triton is not that body. It's too far away. So
Right.
that's just one little thing here.
Seems to me that, these bodies, T might be Mars and Y might be Venus. Or the other way around. T might be Venus and Y might be Mars.
Well, actually,
that's
I'll
what
open.
it was.
Sorry, no. Please go ahead.
That's Velikovsky's designations, which he didn't get very far with the rest of the
No, that
community.
makes sense. Please ask our guest some questions here regarding some of these things, because obviously some of you are much more into the Bible stuff than I am, but I do recognize that things are, given some of these dates, they're, clearly very interesting chronological dates, with 776, for example.
I was listening intently for some time. I find it very interesting, though I hold no religious fundamentalistic viewpoints at all in terms of the narrative itself. I find it, when we're looking at these moon, I see it right now too. The moon incident. That's what I wanted to talk about again.
Which one? The earlier one, or the one closest to us?
One closest to us. That was really interesting.
1547, April 23rd,
Right,
24th,
right.
and 25th. 3 days of darkness.
Right. And let me make this comment. I know retrocalculating is what historians do. I would even say Manetho was doing the same thing, even in his time. And it's a really hard task of work, essentially, and before we even talk about it, because it's hard to, especially with calendar reforms, and time changing. I think we talked about that last week a little bit. It becomes difficult, I still want to talk though about that the closer moon event, the 3 days. Can you hear me now? You still there? Yeah. That's interesting. Go ahead.
I'm not,
yeah, I want you to read.
I'm not a model. I'm not a modelist. I just recognize that these things occur.
Yeah, right. In other words, like I'm talking about the older historians, because people always talk about, well, when historians look back at history, they don't look at the present, so to speak. So, just piecing it together, if you will. I've always been interested and fascinated with that in itself. But then the moon specifically, though, that was intriguing to me. So, is there a cause and effect to that? Essentially, the more recent moon event.
Well, it's part of the same cycle. As far as I can tell, it's the same body. And it's of course that was the kind of like Velikovsky. He put an end date to his Venus encounters. I didn't, and I kept on going, and it seemed to bear out. But in the 17th century, it seems to me it hasn't reoccurred. That particular cycle, I think, has ended. I hope.
Do you think that as people should know in the electric universe, that Venus acts like a comet to this day, and we cross its tail every once in a while when we come close to it at its closest point? Do you think that the electrical connection between Earth and Venus could have something to do with the moon changing position that at that late a date. I seem to think that it could. If Venus doesn't have a magnetosphere like we do, it just has this great big long cometary tail, and we know that even though we can't see this cometary tail with our eyes in the sky, we know it's there in dark mode, and even that kind of energy flowing in dark mode could have an influence on our moon that's whipping around in our magnetosphere on its shell at its certain charge.
Yeah, I don't know why everybody seems to think that the polar configuration is a difficulty. This is nonsense. The galaxy arms are polar configurations. If they're delayed, but that's what they are. If they were, I guess, if they were more powered, they'd be completely straight. But I don't know. I'm not a modelist. I don't know, but I know what a polar configuration is, and that's what a galaxy arm is. It's a known function. It works, and these tails, they kind of just push us. But if they didn't, the inner planets would become a polar configuration right around the sun. They would all zoom in together, and we'd be all circling together as one unit.
Right.
And one day that's going to happen, you know. And the moon, I think the moon would be left behind. I don't know how that would change the dynamics of just the fact that Venus's tail, magneto tail, comes in and pushes us away, because that's what it's doing. We fall into the sun and it pushes us away. But if it was to bring us in, probably Mercury would have to connect with the sun. But if it did, it would take us all in.
Right. Well, as Venus cools, maybe 500 years ago it was 1,000 degrees instead of 850 like it is now, and due to the fact that it's condensing or incandescing less and less as time goes by, maybe that is the mechanism that's causing some of these issues, Y and T.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to know those kinds of how many times this thing has occurred. I don't know we're going to know that, because as others have said before, there's an unwillingness to dig further than a certain point. There's like probably 3 civilizations beneath all the others, and they're just not
as
willing
I
to go
understand,
down.
there's five layers of destructions all around the world.
Oh, well, that's just recent. You're talking about the stuff that's in my that's in the historical record. I'm talking about 200,000 years ago.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Or maybe even
25 layers.
Who knows? I don't think the destruction level. I mean, that would tell us, though, if we actually did dig, and then there weren't any of these cycles of destructions, but there were cycles of civilizations, then we would know that they were in the golden era, that we were around Saturn, and everything was cool.
Well, I think if you go down into the carnivorous era, where it was just pine cones and ferns, and that was the golden era. And again, that wasn't that long ago. That was only maybe 30,000 years ago that all of this changed. And what finally really did it for the dinosaurs and mammoths and giant lions was this electrical change that zapped the earth, killed everything that was on the surface that couldn't get underground quickly, and or that had a large electrical footprint on the ground. They got zapped, like Raymond suggests. And the winds, the supersonic winds, just took them and piled them up against ridges, and just buried them and fused them into the ground. And I think it'd be hard to say, keep digging down and find this era. I think it's in certain areas of the world it's sitting on the top of the ground, and certain other areas of the ground it's been buried 100 feet, or well, maybe not 100 feet, 40 feet or 50 feet as under a mountain from the original level at the bottom of the mountain, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
there's indications that there's um, that I've read about that doesn't touch on 10 times further back in time than I touch. The question is that the same bodies? Is the historical record here that I've got that matches with these cycles? Are these the same bodies in the past, or were they Mars and Venus and others doing things? Until I can't do anything until somebody gives me some records I can look at.
Well,
But
see, I think you can condense that down even further. Some of these, the stuff that's based on uniformitarianism, and even shrunk down from uniformitarianism as a timeline, may be incorrect. I hate saying it, but these thunderbolts of the gods are known to tear down mountains and create mountains in a day. We saw it on our ancestors saw it on Mars, Valley Marineris being ripped out in a single event, and Olympus Mons being created, the solar system's largest volcano being created in no time flat through these electrical thunderbolts.
Oh no, no doubt about that. And the establishment definitely is wrong because, as I've said before, is that the 10 million year marker for modern human beings on the geological time scale has already been proven by the DNA that it's only 200,000. And that's including not only
and
us, but
that number is very significant because we've seen NASA suggest that these Herberg-Harrow objects on these Birkeland currents on the filaments, they sort of think that they might coalesce into. I seem to think that they probably coalesce into solar systems, and in order for that to do that would take. They say NASA says these Herberg-Harrow objects last about 80,000 years to 60,000 years. I suggest maybe 120,000 years to 60,000 years, and then they coalesce into solar systems as the main sequence star on that Birkeland current pulls everything into it. Right? That's how I think this solar system that we're in now is probably only a couple 300,000 years old.
Oh, the configuration that we have now definitely. I don't know if the Saturn golden era stops at the deluge date or whatever. We don't. They're not looking at the data that we do have in that light, so they're leaving things out for us not to be able to see.
Right. Well, on the timeline, we can see that we were just recently pulled into this solar system. What, maybe 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 years ago. And if these strings of pearls, main sequence stars, red giants, gas, brown dwarfs, if they are all on alignment on these Birkeland currents and they get pulled in together, and that takes about 80,000 years to 100,000 years to do, we're very young. We're not as young as the Bible says, but we're not as old as the standard cosmology tells us this with this 4.5 billion year old solar system that we live in, and late heavy bombardment, cratering the moon, and that's wrong. I'm almost positive of it.
Well, the 6,000-year-old Earth is something that didn't come about until extreme views came in the American Revolution, the American Civil War. It's only, it's not.
Well, I thought that was the Jewish calendar was 6,000 years.
Oh,
We're
No,
in year 6,000 or something like that in the Jewish calendar.
Yeah, but that the Earth
that
being
was-
only that old is
It's
very
ridiculous.
recent.
I understand that,
Yeah,
but
it's ridiculous.
I think what they're referring to in the Jewish calendar was when the birth of Venus happened. They didn't say the birth of Venus, but the Greeks said the birth of Venus. The Jewish people focused on let there be light when Saturn birthed Venus, and Venus was incandescent, and Saturn seemed to have lit up for a period of time, and I'm guessing about 7 days.
Well, let's just go to the.
There are ancient texts that describe our sun brightening for a period of time and then dimming again. And if our sun was Saturn and it was a red star and it was giving off red light and it brightened up to full spectrum, which we think it did, that would be the God created light and the heavens and the earth, and bingo bango bongo.
Yeah, I was gonna wait until Neil got back, but we'll just take it to the next one then.
Yeah, carry on.
No, is it just us? I don't see Neil.
It's you, me, Sean, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Still, I think there's a few of us still here.
Yeah,
Sound off, fellas. Sound off.
I'm still here as well.
Oh, sorry. My thing doesn't.
I'm here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's
Here's
fine.
the geological column. Here's the Holocene, and here's the rest of them. You notice that the Cambrian at 500 million years old is only 6.2. That's all the age that it is. And the Earth itself is not even 100 million years old on average. The calculations that you can run by the heat or whatever. The Grand Canyon shows that the Cambrian is not even a mile deep, and each mile represents, the archaeological rate of 1 foot per millennium is only 5.25 million years, and it's not over a mile deep from where it's on the top to the bottom. To the Cambrian era, Cambrian explosion. Then, interesting enough, this 3.2 million years, 3 years later, is a life explosion event as well, as was ours at 3 or 200,000 years ago. That's when life exploded. 6 million, yeah.
Sorry, could you just say that again, please? Because I just misheard that number.
The Cambrian era?
Yes.
Okay, it's only 6.2 million years ago.
Okay.
Now, some people will say,
And he said that's when life exploded.
Yes.
But I
Earth,
think that's when we disconnected from the purple dawn and Saturn, and it wasn't that long ago. That's what I'm saying. It was only like 20,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago that we disconnected all of this. And uniformitarianism is completely wrong. 500 million years is out of the question that we're that old.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. ARP showed that there was a cycle in the cosmos of 3 million years. So every 3 million years, there's a renewal or something. But that's in the cosmological framework, and that it shows right there. And then the 3.2 million is Flanders' new comet creation event. Basically, there's like 3 ways that you can calculate the age of the Earth, and it's just not that old. 100 million at most.
Yeah, I see. I think 100 million is way too high. I'm going for 250,000 years old, maybe, since its formation on the Birkeland current in the Herbert-Haro object.
Yeah, there's all kinds of assumptions.
Can I just add just to that? Just for interest, I suppose, from what I've heard, from this ancient Indian stories, that they also say that they feel that the Earth is about 300,000 years old. So it may lend to what you're just saying now about the age of the Earth.
How would they know?
Well,
Sorry?
the ancient Indians say that the universe is multiple Kali Yugas, like multiple billions of years old. The universe itself.
No,
Yes,
but sorry, go ahead, Tanveer.
oh no, sorry. So I was just saying that I'm sure that there is a figure that they say that the Earth isn't as old as what as science is telling us, and they feel it's on the order of hundreds of thousands of years, as opposed to millions of years, just like you were saying just now.
It's interesting because
yeah.
there's
Well, the Earth being created on a Birkeland current and on a Z-pinch beside a brown dwarf star, and
Yeah.
then being encapsulated in its glow as it's being fed energy on the Birkeland current and
Yes.
being pulled into a main sequence star makes really a lot of sense, because we see that in space.
Except
Yes.
of two reasons. On the surface, I agree.
Okay, go ahead.
John Cook did something very interesting that I particularly agreed with. And by the way, another gentleman, Mario Bildreps, would argue as well. And let me just try to encapsulate these two pieces of evidence very quickly. Number one, he knows about flowering plants. Flowering plants occurred to a conventional chronology show up 270 million years ago. This was his argument that we were dropped off here 270 million years ago. Now, this is according to the geological record. If we consider the geologic record as a timestamp, which we don't. So, however, there is argument to say that it might just be compressed. For example, if the environment of the Earth happens to be, let's just imagine a number, I'll pick 1,000 times, or 3 orders of magnitude more energetic than the current, than the current Earth, and we say there is a linear relationship between that current density or electron density and radioactive decay rates. Now, this is not remotely proven. Okay, I'm talking on my ass here. However, there is arguments that
Theoretical.
that this is a theoretical concept and it does occur. Which is one of the arguments with which we saw, Tanveer, with talking at the Bath conference, which was the argument that we could turn highly radioactive into glass and inert or whatever, and that would be ideal. So that means it's not a timestamp, but let's assume then it was linear. So if it was happening 1,000 times more energetic at the time, then it would be 1,000 times more decay or more time has passed. So if that's the case, 6 billion becomes 6 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this could put things on a different time frame. Now, we don't even know if that's true.
What if it's 100,000 times more powerful?
Yeah, we don't have that number.
6,000.
No, you can.
Or 200,000.
4 orders of magnitude. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. The end result was in this Mindscape experiment was that you can see the problems of coming up with chronological dating just from that alone. Yeah. Now, looking at history, though, we now have time frames, and we have another source of recent history, which would be ice cores. Now, I don't know exactly how much I can be a bastard about critiquing those, so I'm going to leave that to someone else.
Could be storms, or they could represent years.
No, I'm not going to try to argue that these people don't know what ice storm. I mean, I argue that they don't know how glaciers carve rocks, because I've showed you pictures of rivers crossing that ice can't do. So, no, be it glaciers or not. So it's not. There's clearly something else happening there, but. With regards to the ice cores, if they are, the Greenland ice sheet is fair, which of course now James just called that into question. He said that at least the lower part of Greenland was green. Not the whole thing, I don't suppose, because apparently it was 3 islands, and I don't even know the whole minutiae of what's underneath there. But there is, however, an ice core, and the ice core samples that we have so far seem to indicate, or go back at least, half a million years. And if that's the case, Mario Bildreps, another gentleman you can look up his website or go look him up on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. But basically, he's a gentleman who discusses
temple orientations.
Well, yes, temporal orientations, and he basically says that the Earth has had multiple different North Poles, and he shows you where they used to be aligned based on the alignments of temples, basically claiming that we can date them, and they all go along one line. I thought that was very interesting, and it is. I mean, I don't know. I can't really. I mean, if he made it all up, sure, but it looks like it has merit. So,
and if James is correct with his amount of polar flips that have been happening, or Earth flips that have been happening in a very short amount of period of time, these monuments can be their timestamp can be shortened as well.
Well, or I mean, if we're assuming these are years, basically it says that something like mankind has been making monuments around the world of different shapes and sizes, and some of them are orientated to a pole that was just off the coast of Newfoundland, just
for
below,
at least 50,000 years.
Yeah, so that's that. See, when I look at this information here, and then I look at information like that with regards to the flowering plant idea, and now I have to square this circle, because orchids are the first flowering plants that we got on Earth. Before that, where I live in Canada, you get a lot of pine cones, pine cones and ferns, because they can take an enormous amount of water. Like, I mean, a literal shit ton. And
well,
it could be raining.
That was their natural state in this purple dawn of creation.
Well, the argument goes,
environment was all kinds of water in the air itself, and it was just dripping off the plants.
So that is a descriptor, or a fairly good idea. But one of the arguments, therefore, is, of course, the seeds. The pine cones themselves take 3 or so years to germinate. They only germinate and pop open sometimes because of fires. Like lightning strikes, which would be a perfectly good power source because they had no seasons to sort of store and then spawn the cycle.
Well, in the purple dawn, I'm sure they had storms still in the atmosphere.
Well,
I mean,
look at Venus. Venus has so much storms in the atmosphere that it's constantly lit from all directions, and there's no shadows. So,
well, it's incandescent.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's global. It's glowing like a bulb. Yeah. I mean, you know that because it landed there, and it was like, what, 50 kilometers of clouds or something. So they hit the bottom of Venus, and lo and behold, it's still lit.
Bright as day.
Bright as day, except no shadows. So that's why the pictures from Venus look kind of weird, because you're looking around and you can't really see shadows.
Yeah, you'd expect to see the lander's legs and all of that, but
I mean, obviously directly underneath a rock, there's a shadow. Don't get me wrong, but it's lit from the horizon to horizon by this glow. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The argument I was trying to make then is just a simple: how do we get a grasp on this? How old is the Earth? It seems to me that we've been doing our thing for a long period of time. To say that we were inhabited at the same time as dinosaurs sounds ridiculous, because it does.
You see these opar objects that we find in supposed 300 million year old coal, or
you could have just
find
laid down,
a hammer that is embedded in a stone that is supposedly 175 million years old.
It could have been picked up from a Roman ship that was blown out of the sky and then dropped and fused into coal on the ground. We don't know when this occurred.
Well, we have a suspicion that a lot of these petrochemicals were laid down by Venus passing through its tail.
That wouldn't surprise me.
It's being loaded with a lot of petrochemicals. Manna from the sky is just petrochemical in highly complex form.
I can't argue with that. I just can't, because I don't know. And we don't even know if that's even real. However, it appears to have some weight. I will give you that. But this is what
apparently some of this manna had fallen in the 1970s down in the States.
I've seen some of those I've seen some of those situations where people have seen actual like material that looked organic, that like mucus or something like that, and it had covered a field and then it sort of dissipated. Like, was it just foam from a lake? You know, what was going on there?
Right, I think that was in the 1970s, and I think it came from the heavens, and it
Oh my
might have
God,
been us
we've
passing
had-
through
we've-
Venus's tail
we've
and
seen-
it depositing manna.
We've seen
It may
frogs
evaporate, yeah.
inside rocks come to life, and that's no joke that probably happened, because the I mean, the amount of witnesses to the tales are astronomical, and it makes sense that if you were frogs in a muddy environment, you would have a natural Faraday cage around yourself as an amphibian, with the mucus all around yourself, and you get picked up, and that is now turned into a ball because of you're now a positive source with a negative outside.
Electrical
blah, blah, blah.
attraction.
Exactly, and then you're now deposited in a rock bed, and then someone picks you up later. You're perfectly hermetically sealed.
But you're called 200 million year old frog that comes to life. Yeah, okay.
Well, that's what I mean. We don't know when this happened. Yeah. So anyway, these are the problems
Well, we
that
think,
the
we
electric.
think it's a few thousand years ago, or it could have happened a few thousand years ago, or it could have
Well,
happened
look at the
12,000,
events that we were just talking about
900
with
years ago,
James's
yeah.
work to bring it back around. We don't know. The truth of the matter is, I think that we have to be. When things changed, there was great speciation after great devastation. That could have been mutation. That could have been
mutation.
Animals getting together because they have nowhere else to turn, and life finds a way. Who knows? So, but that seemed to be a repeating mantra of death every 26 million years. But how far along is that now? Is that only 26,000? When were we dropped off? How long have we been there? How long were years? Years, of course, would mean nothing to these people. Only when Kronos, the god of time, showed up did we get time. Because that way we had time. I mean, it rotated in the sky clockwise every day.
We may have seen a few small bright points of light through this purple haze. Or
anyway,
purple corona, yeah.
So what did I miss, by the way? I stepped out. Unfortunately, I had something I had to do, but...
well, you missed us talking about Venus being a comet and being incandescent and all of that, so...
I mean, with in regards to James's work.
Oh, he was going through the Bible stuff, the dates and times in the Bible.
Oh, okay, these here. I noticed some of these on another page there, and Hetep, what's that mean? I know Djoser. Is that a pharaoh?
Hetep sounds Egyptian to me.
Well, yeah, Menes and yeah.
Are you there, James?
I think he's muted. He's yes,
moving. I am. I'm sorry. I thought.
You've done it once or twice. That's okay.
I just wanted to finish up on this the age of the Earth. The three kinds of calculations that I've done is basically the establishment stuff. So I'm using their own stuff to show them that they're way off of their own.
Basically, using themselves as a falsification to themselves. Yeah.
One step at a time, for these guys, Now, Jazzer, I'm not quite sure what you were thinking of.
Oh, I just wanted to know what Hetep means. That I noticed Dozer down there, so I assume that these were names of.
That's an Egyptian king.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I was on the money then. Okay.
That would be Amenhotep.
Well, where does this king's list come from? This list here. These.
So those are Egyptian. Those are the Egyptians. I just give the cycles here. I can jump to the entire list if you want.
Oh no, I was just because I don't actually know where they got this list of names from. Like I had no idea. Like I know Cheops or Khufu is supposed to have been the dude who, made the pyramids ostensibly.
Now, these are just some of the traditional dates, and these are the things that pop up that happen to synchronize with either of the cycles. Either the beginning or here's the end of Heptap, here's the beginning of Dosher, that kind of stuff. They just happen to. I like the kingless period here myself because there's two. Beginning and end are the 6-year period is right in between these two cycles. So it really nails as far as where that cycle. Not only does it prove that cycle in the tree rings, but it proves this cycle here.
Well, do you think the king was killed during the event? And
let's not think of even. See, this is the part where I'm even debating this. What if these guys, when they're coming close to us for a year or two, we give them these names, and this is who rules because they were affecting things on the earth. Like, I mean, this is just a thought that pops into my head, obviously, but like, how could you not want to make that assumption or that?
Well, in the Old Kingdom, that does hold true, but in the Pharaoh's times, I don't think that holds true. I think they were real people.
Well, clearly some of them were Akhenaten, King Tut. I understand. Possible murder, great mystery, woohoo, coneheads, incest, the whole 9 yards. I mean, like, I know they're real, but I'm referring to older than that, obviously. And what did that mean? Anyway.
Could it also be that maybe these let's say these names came from people who actually came from these planets or came from these extraterrestrial places or whatever?
Oh, that scares the hell out of me. No, it's cool. One of the there is an argument from some one of the gentlemen has a Ganymede hypothesis. Ted Holden, he believes firmly that human beings came from there. I don't
from
obviously
the water bridge between Titan and Earth.
But that said, the possibility of some creatures moving from, like, for example, we know that octopuses or octopi or whatever you want to call them are not like us. Spiders are not like us. They have, I mean, we're a 4-legged, 5 branching organism, so to speak. And everything on the planet is kind of like that, except for those freaking things. And
I have a theory about that.
It was a demon? Dancing demon. No, something isn't right there.
No, it wasn't a dancing demon. You realize that Mars was encapsulated inside Saturn as well.
That has not escaped me.
There was a lot of life on Mars, and living beings that were probably
it would have been our sister planet,
RH negative as opposed to our RH positive.
You got to get off this whole blood thing, because I don't think it means what you think it means.
There is ancient text describing fallen angels in the Bible and older, that beings
the Apocrypha has them in it. Yes, but
beings came from the sky. Some of them died on impact. Some of them survived the transition.
Yes, but we also know that animals were picked up
and
from one part of our planet to the other.
That's my theory anyway. That was my theory. You just didn't let me finish my theory, but that's okay.
No, I understand. I'm sorry, but I would just, I mean, we just can't tell where they came from.
And I'm now offended,
things falling from the sky, I agree with.
I will not accept your apology.
No, it doesn't matter. I don't care. No, but really, if coming from Mars, coming from any other planet, it is actually something we can't rule out. However,
well, we know 6.5 kilometers of the Martian hemisphere is gone. The northern hemisphere is gone. Its atmosphere has been stripped away. It had an atmosphere. We're sure of it. And in the oscillations back and forth, I'm not saying that 6.5 kilometers was ripped off in one.
No, it was apparently connected for several thousand years. So yeah.
Yeah, so back and forth a bunch of times is going to devastate that planet. We're on the end of the circuit, which is feeding us the mass of Mars. And we're also probably getting a lot of cometary mass coming from Venus that's being pulled from Venus when it gets close to Venus into Mars. And, we're getting a lot of stuff coming from this polar connection. And when it breaks finally, we get all of this water.
Well,
all of it from Saturn. Well, not all of it that's on Earth. There was obviously water in the connection, giving us in the purple dun this moist. There was water on the Earth already, but it was being supplied to us from Saturn regardless. During the connection break, all that water that was suspended in that electrical connection came to Earth and went back to Saturn, leaving Venus and Mars barren.
Now, well, I think Venus was just recently birthed, so I'm not even worried about that. But
this is after the birth of Venus.
No, but I mean, being barren is
being
barren is what I meant. It has no life on it, or at least.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's a brand new world and it's screaming hot.
Exactly. But if, for example, Mars was our sister planet in the brown dwarf situation,
the purple dun,
the
cosmic egg, yeah.
But if, for example, we arrived here at a different time, and then we had to deal with the fact that we were now, or part of this polar configuration, who knows? But either way, being the geological ages being what they are, we no longer have the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it took the oceans are only 270 million years old, and if I suddenly say 1,000 is now the rate. I mean, now you're dealing with oceans that are 270,000 years old. So that means the planet.
I would suspect that our oceans increased only 12,800 years ago. Pulse meltwater 1A is
no. I mean, I'm not talking about the oceans grading. I mean the planet gaining size, expanding. Because the reason
that
for
happened
it happening
12,800 years ago too, when the heavens opened up and the Earth opened up.
We know that there is a linear progression of these things. Plus, we also see the north and south shifts across the magnetic field. So we know this took time. We know it took a long time. So we definitely have that nailed down. I'm just wondering. I mean, putting this together, suddenly I'm looking at, well, more water's coming in. You have a different charge now. Suddenly all this water is falling through the planet because it keeps going down.
Even though the purple dawn had dropped when the heliospheres touched, we still had that connection, that electrical connection, and water was suspended in that connection. I'm sure of it.
We clearly were taking water off the top of our planet. So yeah. I mean, where do you think all the snow came from?
I think all that snow came from the heavens when we disconnected from our own Berkeley
I think it was happening.
I mean, heliosphere.
If it's anything like the Talvashar volcano is on Io, and if it was the same type of connection, just like it is on Io, and Io doesn't have a magnetic field really, but Jupiter has a significantly strong one. If it was anything like that, then it would be like going through our North Pole of our planet, and it would come up as a big plume. And it would be like I guess like a ion gun, really, because right up the middle you get a stream of charged particles, but we still wouldn't see that. But the raining down on all sides would be the idea of the what's it called, the.
Well, we didn't see snow until Saturn left.
No. We clearly they saw snow, man. I mean, there would have been water raining down, or snowing down all around the North Pole. I mean, there's a huge amount of current vaporizing water there, and enough to make the entire planet moist.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the current from the north at the North Pole doing it. It might have been doing it, but I think it was Saturn, the birth of Venus, kicked out a planet, and it kicked out a lot of material. Other than a planet, a rocky body, it kicked out water.
Oh, there would have been a
kicked out all
shotgun
kinds of
on
stuff.
moons. I mean, they're all captured around Jupiter and Saturn now.
And
Or the
the
asteroid
rings
belt.
of Saturn is the rest of the water that
Well,
when the connection disconnected, the water came through.
Well, it's clear when that was going on down there,
deposited
when
on Earth and went back to Saturn.
you forgot at that particular time we had rings too. So
Well, yeah, our moon at
wasn't there.
2300 BC destroyed our rings.
Well, obviously, can't deal with a huge friggin' other planet rotating around the damn thing. Anyway, thanks for that wonderful side note. We were trying to talk about our friend here and his actual. Now you're actually
James.
gone all the way into. So these are obviously monarchs that I would know.
Yeah, this is England. Well, sorry.
That's all
United
right.
Kingdom.
United, fractured, it doesn't matter. It's a kingdom.
Yeah.
That place over there across the
They
pond.
call it a United Kingdom, but there's
That's one.
literally a separation between Ireland and the other one. Like,
That is what it's pretty much. It's like a thing in the middle, you see.
you need like something to sort of ratchet them all together and pull them there, you know? Like a belt. Anyway,
Well, 12,800 years ago, that was all joined together. So yeah, okay.
I heard a great description of that in the movie The Man from Earth. Actually, he described it like as if he was there looking out across the English Channel before it was, you know, the English Channel.
Filled with water 12,800 years ago. Yeah.
Anyway, so we got kings here, obviously, from England. But
Yeah,
what's the purpose of dating them here, or are you just getting their reigns?
No, this is the full list. The other ones that I showed were just where the cycles did coincide with the ending or some event. This is 1067, and in the establishment is 1066.
Right.
And the challenge is for that is that you're gonna have to find some year that has been doubled rather than because they push it back a year, and it's a usually.
Is that why it was drilled through my head?
Yeah, probably. 1066. Don't ever forget. Even despite the fact that they had other manuscripts with 1067 in them, and I've always
It's Magna
wanted to
Carta
hold it.
1066, right?
No, it's the invasion of Normandy.
Oh, okay, all right.
12,
William
you're thinking
Conway.
1215.
And
That was only like 4.5 hours ago.
and I can't remember which king it is that has a double year in it. But there's a separation of one of them. They make it non-contemporaneous.
But
One year
why are they
separation.
doing this anyway? Why do they need to add the years?
They had to add a year because they pushed it down 1 year. And you've got the traditional length of the years. They know what these years are for each of these kings. So they have to find a way to stretch it one extra year in there because they pushed it down 1 year.
But why?
The different
Because it
calendar
won't fit
cycles.
otherwise.
Oh, yes, because things change. I remember, yes.
Yeah, the different
Right in
calendar
that area,
year.
yes, the 1460
Quarter year,
something, yeah.
third year, no third year.
No, I got
or no
it now.
quarter year,
I was trying to remember why it happened to be right in that particular point. Because they have that year issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to get the original, Chronicle that had the 1068 and see out where they put where they shortened a year in it, but I couldn't find one.
Well, and you gotta understand that you're also going with an entire church whose entire goal would be to conceal that from you, and they wrote all the books.
Well, then yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be rude about that, but if they could just go, and that was a 7, not a 6, and this is why. And
well, they're pretty careful about the ring lengths. and they've got the histories down pretty darn good. But like I said, there's where there's a will, there's a way, and that kind of puts me to the subject of how they do these other things. Maybe let me get to. Well, here's Ireland. Let's go there for a second. Here's Halloween. 1630 BC, October 31st. And here's this.
And there's no even All
interim.
Hallows Eve back then. Just happened to be October 31st. Okay.
Well, I think it's the Romans that gave that a month and days. So however they did that, it's kind of hard to find out where they all did that. But anyway, this 7-year interim is actually not used, and I haven't figured out exactly how they thought they were going to use this, because at the end of whatever this name of this guy is, who had a 77-year reign, the event happened right. It killed him. So there is no 7 years between here. And in the traditional, they got it 8 years back further. So this is 1338 is what they've got it as. And but as I said before,
so this is BC,
it was
right?
It was just at the last day of the month, and they just added a day on the month, and they just moved it to the last day of the month again. So that's all that's all that means for Halloween.
Anyway, there's in the common era here in 682. After 10 years, there's a Y event there. It's an animal plague. So it's between the 8th year of this king here, and after the mid reign of this king, this sets this chronology basically in stone. It's set. It's solid. Here's the things again. I don't know if you're interested in Egyptian chronology, the reset, the way it is from the Middle Kingdom to the New Kingdom. This is Velikovsky's kind of scenario, and which I agree with.
We know Sean is.
Yeah. Here's the 15th dynasty here, and here's a poppy. And guess who a poppy is? You'll never guess. He's Amram. He's Moses' father.
What?
A poppy is a Hebrew, and he's Amram. That's who he is. It's also the name for Augies. That's the Augies flood. That's who it is.
Well, it's also the name for like heroin, but
that might be a little bit hard to swallow, I suppose. But
I'm just making a joke. But what I meant is that I'm sorry, I'm looking at it very stoically, because so this would be the father of Moses, assuming he was real, the whole baby in a basket type thing.
Right.
Now, we're not talking about the Egyptian father, the stepfather,
or his stepmother, who was the sister of Pharaoh, who was this guy here.
But that whole baby in a basket thing also very astrological in a way.
Oh yeah, and not the first.
Oh, probably not. No.
Yeah, there is Sargon of Akkad, which was in a basket, and that was like 3,500 BC, something like
flood.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a flood. Funny enough.
Yep, in a flood.
That's interesting.
This is an ancient Ethiopian dynasty right here. And Tantamont here, he's the guy. He's the guy that, or not Tantamont. This guy down here, Thom. That's the Exodus pharaoh right there.
Which pharaohs are connected with the Dogon? Do you know?
Dogon.
The Dogon tribe of Africa.
I have no idea.
They're connected.
They were
They
connected
were
by the ancient Cometians, apparently. I don't know how far back it is.
Upper and Lower Egypt. Lower Egypt was were the blacker Egyptians.
Yeah, this very ancient Ethiopian dynasty here is often mixed up with this dynasty right here.
By 800 years
These-
difference or so.
Yeah, they mixed these guys up. Anyway, this is the
Interesting.
This is the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd dynasties, and here is Amrung, better known in the Bible as Agag the Second.
Oh yeah,
Amram-
I always called him Agag.
Yeah. Yes. Agag the Second.
Amen Rude. That's him right there.
Amun-Ra.
31 years after his death,
It's people with the God stick.
is 983, 453 years previous to this guy right here was the first shepherd king. I always
Now,
found
when
out.
you say shepherd king, what are you referring to? It was a shepherd that became a king?
No, Velaskovsky points out very clearly that these guys came in. They would take their herds and they just run them through the towns or villages or whatever, and just decimate everything. You couldn't stop these herds were just humongous, and they would just trample everything, including whatever's to eat or anything like that. Then they would just take everything and spoil and burn the rest of it. This is what there were. This is how they conquered the areas. Of course, they came in Egypt when it
Oh, okay.
was down and out, and they just took it over. And the 21st,
Wow.
22nd, and 23rd dynasties were contemporary with these other ones here. They used these guys to run the rest of the riffraff.
So, cattle stampedes aren't a new thing?
Well, it
Oh,
just
no,
it
they
just
use
shows you
Vikings.
that these guys were. I mean, it shows you that they have no connection. They have no more connection. The people we talk to about as ancient Egyptians have no more connection to the pyramids or actually ancient Egypt and the technology they had. Perhaps maybe except for maybe some more recent stuff that they managed to unearth in Cleopatra's time, type of thing. But besides that, there is. I mean, they have as much connection as, the Queen does to who founded England, to William the
Or
Conqueror.
the queen to Muhammad, because she is related to Muhammad, apparently.
I'm sure everyone is probably. Didn't he have like 600 kids?
There's great old Seti, right there, the father of Ramses II. And
they say that there's statues of Ramses kicking around.
Oh yeah, well Nebuchadnezzar II, he was destroying everything. Yeah.
Okay.
He was the great. He was destroying everything that didn't have Ramses II's name on it, because he kind of like made he broke state policy and made a deal with him, and so anything that with his name on it wouldn't be destroyed, but everything else they threw down.
But we're talking about. I mean, some of these statues and stuff were like really hit with some serious fire, and his statue was, I mean, clearly not made by him. Whoever the statue of Ramesses II or whoever that's supposed to be like 100-foot tall statue or something, that can't be him. I mean, there's no way they had that technology.
Yeah, as soon as the priest found out that if it had Ramses II name on it, it wouldn't be destroyed by his army, they put his name on everything.
Yeah. So that's why. Oh, because I mean, some of this stuff, like some of these statues, are as old can be. Like, I mean, really, like, I mean,
Well, they were hit with electrical discharge, which
I've seen that Brian Forster
occurred
video. Yeah.
for a long time after the polar configuration had broken up,
But
encountering Venus and stuff, right?
it's so meticulously done and such hard stone that it was clearly, ancient. It was not something that people could imitate today. So,
Right. Yeah.
apparently, you can go under the skirt of that statue, and they took the time to, make his stuff.
Someone was asking about sharing, and everything that you see here is available to anybody. And both share anything you want that I've been sharing.
So this is really basically the chronology to try to basically piece together what we have for a history, and this is basically just the beginnings of a foundation of trying to understand it.
I think this is pretty much set as far as the traditions go. If the traditions aren't correct,
I didn't mean that. I mean, it has to be. This is just your database to something that you could write a book with, like because it would take a long time to spell it out the way you spelled it out to us. Is what I meant.
Oh yeah. You just, if you want to know the date and when, this is kind of like it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think your recent dates are really good, but I'm not sure about the 6.2 million year old dates for as you've condensed the uniformitarianism thing.
Like
I mean, carry on. I mean, it's great. It's great stuff.
Like I said, I've only used their base to show how small that really is.
Yeah,
now, I got you.
As soon as that's just one step. I can only do with what they got. They wouldn't accept anything else. Now, here's the Assyrian one. This is a really good one because they've taken this contemporary one at the end here on this side here. Ashurbanipal the first, not the second. This guy.
Yeah.
All you gotta do is add 545 years, and you'll get what the establishment puts on him, because they take this whole thing here and stick it on top of here, in between, and push everything else up. That's how they get that there. And then the Babylonians, basically all that they do is when they've got some dynasties up on top that push everything down, they just make them contemporary and compress them closer together. And then everything else is like, instead of contemporary with each other, they stack on top of each other as if they are all a single by themselves.
Well, it fits the narrative, their narrative, so that's why they do it that way, right?
Yeah, but it's really interesting that the Assyrian one here is so simple, but it matches the Babylonian chronicle that way, and it's 545 years. I can show you how this works. Well, here's the Sumerian and Babylonian ones. See the date 3398. See these dates that they have. You simply divide them by 60, and you get the right dates, and it all fits together.
Divided by 60.
Well, these big dates.
That is interesting, because the Sumerian number system is based on 60.
Yeah, if it's holy, or something really, really important, they'll multiply it by 60.
I always found that fascinating.
Wow, that is a connection that is just too unreal.
Now here's the Sumerian Babylonian chronology here. They take this one here and this one here, and they scrunch it up. So they make these older. They push all these up, because these are the what they consider the important ones.
Of course.
They're ancient ones. They They scrunch these two together up above it, and then they push this up here by putting more other. Well, I'll show you where the other ones come from. And here's the here are these guys, and the 898 is the sack of Babylon. See if I can show you. Oh, here's the cassite. This is the interesting. See the date here? This is what they really are. This is what they have them as over here, BC. It's 445 years difference. Exactly what Velikovsky put the difference at. And here again is the sack of Babylon, right here. Same date, same time.
So they have the sack of Babylon at the wrong time then.
No, they take contemporary dynasties. These are contemporary dynasties with the other ones. That's why they have, talking to each other in tablets.
Right.
But they push them up 545 years ahead. All of them, the Assyrian, the Egyptian, and the Babylonian ones.
Right, to match their stories, yeah.
Yeah. Remember that the time difference between tradition and the establishment is that 11 centuries in between, not before and not after, but right in the middle. And it's that 545 years.
They're just trying to adjust to the calendar differences, and they got it wrong.
I don't think so. They were in a kind of like a space race to have their most ancient and important kings to be the oldest. There was kind of like a race.
Oh, okay,
and that's why they used that's why they used the 22nd Sothic era as the date, because that was the oldest at 5698.
Do you have Sarkon dated in here?
Oh yeah.
I guess. Well,
I saw him actually.
Here's his grandson. There he is, right there.
Sargon of Akkad.
2381.
He's the one with those really big eyes, right? That looks surprised.
and the curly locks of hair. Well, not curly, but the braided hair. Yeah. And that weird hat. He has that look like his wife just yelled at him and caught him with his somewhere where it shouldn't be. It's like, Sargon! It's like, that's what he looks like. I'm just saying. It might be a plasma form. Might not. He could just be surprised. Yeah, he's just got PTSD, that's all.
Well, this has been fantastic. I'm actually surprised that you managed to put all this together. This is a massive amount of work.
Yeah, it only took 36 years.
Well, we thank you for the work that you have done. I mean, it's truly amazing.
We're going to have to get you a training. We're going to have to get you to teach people how to use it, though. So that we can, because, there's a lot of data here, and understanding which is which and what ones mean what. It sounds like it's almost like you have the data and the story's still in your head.
Yeah.
And which is totally understandable, but I'm glad that you've actually managed to explain what this all is and what it could be used for. Because at the end of the day, we need to sort of, with as much accuracy as possible, piece together parts of history. And there's going to be a race for that in the EU, really, as time goes on.
Well, I think, Neil, that's going to take multiple people to interpret this, because there are going to be people that are familiar with the kings in Samaria, China, South America, all of this stuff.
You don't have to tell me.
A lot of people to do this,
well,
not
of
just
course.
one person. And James, thank you for making work.
Oh yeah, no problem. But the reason I did this part here, or this part here, I wanted you to get the main synchronicities, because that makes it a framework.
Yes.
And once you got the framework, then it's a lot easier to figure out what was really going on. Because I could spend hours telling you how they screwed it up and why they did it the way that they did. I could have spent the whole time telling you why it's 1718 before the Common Era rather than 1018, 700 years. Because they keep on, they push it up 2,300 years. Now they push it up 700 years, and now, and they couldn't do that to match the other two. They had to only go 5.5 centuries up, and and how they did that. I could have told you how they did that, but you would have been lost.